Hello and welcome to Capital Ideas Live, the video version, the magazine about doing business in Moscow. I'm John Harris.
From a normal school to the finest universities, how does free education work in Moscow?
Every child should have the opportunity, the equal way to get their educational goals.
A little Britain in the Russian capital. What are English schools here like?
The fault of some Western countries is that they're too focused on welfare of the students and not enough on building up a useful body of knowledge.
Watch it now. Capital Ideas Live.
Now, I don't need to tell you about the importance of education for your children and for all children, in fact. In this program, we show you aspects of the existing Russian free state secondary school system. We also show you some of Russia's best international schools based here in Moscow. And we offer a possible glimpse into the future of secondary education here in Moscow. Our first subject is about those Russian state schools. And they've had to transform themselves completely since the collapse of the Soviet Union. They've had to introduce a new syllabus. Basically, they've had to change all their standards so that they can integrate more closely with the modern world.
The Russian school has inherited the concept of access for all and equality from the Soviet system. That's why the schools have numbers instead of names. This is school number 1349 on the outskirts of Moscow. It's an absolutely normal school. The kids from the surrounding residential buildings study here. Today, the head of teaching, Anastasia Shepekina, is receiving a former student and a current student. Hello, Irina Yurievna. Hello. I'm so pleased to see you. With the knowledge that Nastya built up here, she overcame a high level of competition from 150 other candidates per place and got into the Stroganov Arts Academy, which is a one-of-a-kind.
My classmates, Irina Yurievna, helped me in this way. He helped me to find this way because she told me that I have a talent, but I don't think that it's mine.
Nastya wasn't sure of success, but her teachers had simply done their job. In days gone by, psychological tests and developments of that kind were used more in higher education establishments and in professional organizations. Now they're being used more frequently in schools. And this is Moscow State University. Mikhail Lyapin is studying here at the physics faculty. He also graduated from a comprehensive secondary school in his neighborhood, but there were special classes there for physics which took the very best of the best. The school was the base that I'd been looking for 11 years, where they let me get on with what I loved and didn't get in the way too much with the other stuff. He continues to go to the school on Saturdays, but not as a student. This physics lesson goes far beyond the textbooks, but Misha is simply giving back to his school what he once received from it. The Russia of the future, modern, technologically advanced, open to the world, is being created right now. That's exactly what the teachers at Moscow schools are working on.
And I'm going to ask some questions here to Mr. Anton Molev, the chairman of the commission of the Moscow City Duma. I'm so old and I've lived here for such a long time. Immediately I think of the Soviet sort of education system. How much has it changed since the end of the Soviet Union, and what's new?
Some years ago we started the program when the money go after the person, I mean after the student. The more students you have in your school, the more money you have.
So it's more performance-based then, or size-based?
Yes.
It's both
personal-based.
Okay, personal school-based.
Yes, for sure.
Right, okay.
It means that our Moscow schools got more freedom to operate, to manage inside, and to make different decisions. Every child, every person should have the opportunity, the equal way to get their educational goals.
So you're introducing more liberalism, excuse that word, into the schools.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, there's a lot of private schools coming in here from abroad. They're called international schools. I mean, there's 1 or 2 opening each year, and some of them are quite large.
Moscow?
In Moscow, you know, the Brooks Education, Cambridge International, British International School, ISM, ESS, and then they go on forever.
Yeah, I know a lot of them. Yeah,
a lot of them. And why? Firstly, why do you allow these schools to open up? Why? Because in a way they're showing the highlighting the bad aspects of the state system that they exist.
I don't see any problem in that.
Okay.
I'm sure that the better results are there when we have the variety, the different ways. In that case, I can tell you that for 2 or 3 previous years, about 30 or 35 Moscow schools started IB programs.
Right.
And I'm very appreciate that approach, and it's very interesting. I visited several IB international conferences. It's very interesting, and that is great that Moscow can, not only Moscow, different Russian cities, but Moscow for sure will have more possibilities for that.
Of course, in Moscow, there are a small number of private, so-called independent or international schools operating, and they provide an education which is almost identical to that you can find anywhere else in the world. Our next report is about those schools which are now operating in competition with each other, which is actually not a bad thing, as it ensures that they provide a full range of educational facilities.
Private schools are chosen by the most prosperous and most responsible of Moscow parents. Every month, families spend as much on a single child as normal Muscovites earn in total. But for that money, they get an education that, in days gone by, they would have had to travel far from home to get.
All our students bilingual, like their working language at school is English, and we encourage our students to speak only English, even outside the school.
I control it, but sometimes to me, I don't want to speak English and just speaking on Russian.
British children are here to study like they do at home, while Russians are here for the British system, where the child creates rather than just copying stuff down. For example, in David Nicholas's class, Moscow children reconstruct the Great Fire of London of 1666.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so it stands out.
David has worked in Spain and Turkey, but he eventually opted for Russia. He likes the thirst for knowledge that Russian children demonstrate, and he likes the packed life to be led in the Russian capital just as much.
There is quite a big international expat scene, so you can meet people and you can socialise, and there's lots of things to do. So it is, and obviously being a capital, there is like lots of things like go for walks, go to the cinema, English-speaking cinemas, which for me, as my Russian is very poor, is very important. So there are lots of amenities around.
International headhunting specialist Gregory Stewart approves of David's choice. Despite the harsh climate, it's worth going to Moscow to make new acquaintances, for personal and career development, and for a comfortable way of life.
They see an opportunity to fast-track their careers. There are not as many people who are willing to relocate to Moscow as, say, a Munich or a Paris. And so within their organisations, they might have a chance to get more responsibility quicker.
Don't forget, you can use the table.
Ross Hunter is the director of this school. He's served the English education system for 40 years, 20 of them in Russia. Here, Ross has managed to progress from being a teacher to being a director. He believes that international schools in Moscow have a great future.
Now, education has changed in Russia significantly since the fall of the Soviet Union, and one of the biggest changes, of course, is the appearance of international schools. Now, what are international schools? How do they operate? What are they for? Now, this is what I'm going to be talking about with Ross Hunter, who's the headmaster of ESS Lefortovo, one of the international schools I'm talking about, and also the founder of a series of schools around Moscow. In Russia, what is the best syllable for an international school to adopt to be able to allow it to educate Russian children?
I think to an extent that's a false god. The international curriculum, whether it leads to A-levels or IB, has quite a lot of common factors, including multilingualism, including objective exams set and marked externally, but most of all, it's the style of teaching which is promoting independent learning. It's not good enough just to get the grades in school. Students have got to be ready for the much tougher, unsupported life at a university. So we are not just drilling knowledge in, we are looking to inculcate a mindset which is questioning, problem solving, and independently driven.
Okay, well that's actually very good that you talked about that, because there is some criticism, a lot of criticism being levelled at secondary schools in Russia, in general, state schools as well as international schools, that they're exam factories, that all they really want to do is to produce people who can get into university with certain grades.
Let's be clear. Everybody has a right to expect the highest academic standards and good exam grades. Yeah. If you can match the Russian system of enormous quantities of knowledge, balance that with an inquiring mind and a problem-solving approach, you've got a really strong combination. Yeah. The fault of some Western countries is that they're too focused on welfare of the students and not enough on building up a useful body of knowledge.
But it's considered that a lot of new independent schools have already opened and a lot more are going to open. How many of these schools can the Russian market take?
Moscow is continuing to grow. Moscow is enjoying a period of rising prosperity. There seems to be no limit to the number of families, local and expat, who want the best for their children and are prepared to put their hands in their pockets and offer something a little bit special and a little bit more useful in the later stages.
So I hope you found out something interesting and useful for you about education in Moscow in this programme. That's all we have time for today. Thank you very much. I'm John Harrison.